Todo esto es bioeconomía
Bioeconomy.
en la Amazonía. Y promoverla nos lleva a un futuro con más
qualidade de vida,
Well-being.
calidad de vida,
oportunidades
económicas
Economic opportunities.
y protección de la biodiversidad.
Biodiversity.
conexão.
Innovation.
Convergencia para la bioeconomía en la Panamazonía. Panamazonía en red. Foro de innovación e inversiones en la bioeconomía. Sean bienvenidos.
Welcome everyone.
Sejam bem-vindos.
Bom dia a todas e todos.
Good morning, everyone. We are going to start another panel of the Pan-Amazonic Network this is organized by the Pan-Amazonic Network for Bioeconomy. We're looking at innovation, and the objective is to have a sustainable bioeconomy in the Amazon. And it's a great pleasure to be with you this morning. It's a topic that is how to create access to the markets and the local products. I'm Ana Cláudia Costa, the president of Conexsus and Casa de Nova York, and I dedicate my trajectory to connect worlds, communities, local solutions, and global innovation. Over the last few years, Conexsus has worked in the construction of these systems to support the work and everything in the Amazon. So we still have solutions that include the forest, and today we're going to talk about how we can build bridges and have conscious consumption, and also access to opportunities, justice, and dignity for those who take care of the standing forest. We're going to talk about concrete paths and collaborations, practices that work, and the challenges that we still have ahead of us. So I have the pleasure of sharing this space with three incredible guests. Carolina Ochoa from Quintessa, a Brazilian organization which is a reference in this area, and she's going to talk about the strategy of dealing with the strengthening of this transformation on a daily basis. Then we have a Bolivian company, a hacker from that company, and that talks about the power of forest products with innovation, scale, and commitment to the origin. And IME is a direct connection between the Amazon and the world. And Jorge López-Dóriga, AGE from Peru, that looks at the dedication of integrating spirituality and sustainability in large-scale business. Thank you for accepting this invitation, and I'm sure this is going to be a great conversation, very provoking, and our dynamics will be divided into three blocks. We will start with the main introductions, and then we're going to make some exchanges, and I invite everybody who is watching us to interact through the chat, because we're also going to have a round of questions from the audience. So I'll observe from here if there are any questions from the audience. So without further ado, I'm going to start with you, Carolina. So Quintessa, in supporting impacts in business, how do you see the opportunities for a bioeconomy to reach the markets? Hello, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for the introduction, and I am one of the partners here that lead our business unit in the use of the earth that looks at bioeconomy and restoration. And it's a pleasure to be here in this Pan-Amazonic Forum. I am Brazilian, but my mother is Peruvian. I was telling the organization about this. That's why we have this connection between Brazil and all the other countries of the Amazonic region. So here in our conversation today, I'm going to bring you two perspectives, one that has to do with business and this trajectory of 15 years working in this area and the integration between innovation and the positive impact, socio-environmental impact. So especially when we look at socio-bioeconomy business, their perspectives, and also in the last 7 years, we have also worked with large companies when we talk about open innovation, and I'm going to talk about this part as well, integration of bioeconomy with the industry. But in this specific point, looking at the business, we have an issue in terms of access to the market. This can happen through the government, through public policies. There are several initiatives here in Brazil that are also looking at exports as a way of accessing market. We also see that there are several initiatives, the B2C market for consumers via e-commerce and partnership with large marketplaces as a way of supporting bioeconomy and giving a flow to the products and logistics. It's very important. We have also gone into B2B. So we're talking about other companies and the retail, and we're talking about great retailers that are looking at this in Brazil, placing several points that provide visibility to products that come from the socio-bioeconomy in the Amazon. And we're also discussing with the industry. So the industry is a buyer, and in this practice, we have divided into two perspectives. One of the industry that wants to relate to bioeconomy as an innovation of the product or a competitive differential aspect. So for example, here we have a great company in the sector or that sells to the end consumer. And in a partnership with Som Brasil, bringing sauces from the Amazon and to be able to get to the market. We also have Manioc that brings several products with Amazon products, and it's very close. There's also Ajinomoto, who is a large company, a Japanese company that wants to include the taste of the Amazon in the routine of Brazilian consumers. And these products are not seen as exotic. They will have a day-to-day contact, and also trying to relate to the industry that we want to adjust the operation for. So we have a case of Quintessa. It's the implementation of something that is called apoena. So they buy the coconut from Maranhão, and they add this to fuel. It's very interesting because when you put this additive in fuel, it makes you use less fuel. So it's a product that it's a lot of innovation. There is a socioeconomic impact, and there's economy as well for the company to use less fuel. So we implemented this in the Ambev operation, who is our customer for 4 or 5 years. And it's one of the open innovation programs that we have. We did a test in a certain freight. It really worked out. And now the challenge is in scaling it up. So that's what I wanted to say, looking at these examples and things that are already happening in spite of all the challenges that we have in terms of socio-bioeconomy in the market. Thank you. Incredible, and I think this whole experience, it's not only we that see these challenges in the Amazon, and there isn't enough infrastructure to access the markets and using platforms and other ecosystems. We already work a lot with these local ecosystems so that the products are able to have new markets being accessed and expanding. And I'd like to pass it on to Emin. He's going to contribute to the local perspective of those who are able to, from the territory, construct a very strong product, which is the nut from the Amazon that already has international recognition. So if you could share a little bit about everything. So what are the quantities that you accumulated in this perspective of connecting regional production with demanding global markets that need several certifications, that demand several certifications to be able to provide development and maturity? I think that would be a great contribution to the panel. Thank you very much. My name is Hecker. and I am the general director of the company. It's a family company, and it's in Bolivia ever since the 13th of May of 1984. So we can say that we are the pioneers in the production and exportation of nuts in Bolivia. And we are able to export the first container of hazelnuts in Europe in 2019. So we have a lot of experience in everything that is related to the market that involves integration in this production chain for the nuts. In fact, this whole integration process was a great challenge for us as a family and as a company, because on the one hand, we have to see a global context and how the international markets work. And it is very clear that it is rare for companies who think about development to integrate this chain, to be able to take this up because they don't have access to information or to the end markets. So that's the first challenge that we had to break down to be able to guarantee the integration of the chain. And to be able to do this, we needed to have in different countries of the world branches to be able to have access to the end consumer. And this is because of the topic of legal safety and the international treaties, and also the legal jurisdiction when you're about to sign a contract prevents our Bolivian companies from having direct access. So that's why I think the greatest lesson that we've had during all of this time is that on the one hand, we had to compete with large companies from abroad. And on the other hand, we as producers and exporters of specific niche product, we have a disadvantage because we cannot offer a whole series of products, just like the importers or intermediates who exist. So selling different products, trading different products all over the world. So we are concentrated specifically on the nuts, and the competitive disadvantage with regard to other exporters is that we could not always compensate the prices. So we were obliged all the time to offer the product that we were exporting with regard to the international market price, while the other competitors that act in the market, they could compensate the prices with another sort of nut. So if the price of the nut went up or down, it was compensated with the prices of other products like macadamia or another kind of nut that they had in their portfolio. So these were the challenges that we had to overcome. But finally, inside the market niche that we have, we got an additional niche, which is the fair wild, organic. So inside this interaction of the chain, the integration of the chain, the conventional product was concentrated specifically on this most exclusive niche. And we know about the challenges that exist inside the production and the challenges that exist when we talk about logistics in a country like Bolivia. Thank you very much. Thank you, Amy. So you talk a lot about how important it is not only to identify your market niche specifically and investing in it, but how it's important to increase this awareness. And I think Jorge has a lot to contribute in this perspective. So from AGI, which is a multinational and it works with innovation, spirituality. So how does the AGI group see the role of the large companies in the support of bioeconomy and in this enhancement of the market awareness that is just as important as the products of the bioeconomy in the Amazon. And if you could also share a little bit of the examples that AGI has in contribution to the bioeconomic chains in the Amazon. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ana Costa. In fact, it's a pleasure to be here, and I love that you call it the Pan-Amazonia, because the Amazon does not have any borders. We cannot divide the Amazon into countries, and that's the case because it's a global Amazon, and we have to work on it with this Pan-Amazonic view. I'm very happy to participate here. So in this group, AGI, we are present in the Amazon countries, and we are trying to work in this way. The AGI group was born 35 years ago, and we are young compared to the AIME companies, but we were born out of a family company. It is a family company that was born in Ayacucho. It's a small village called São Miguel. So in other words, besides being a Peruvian company, it's not even from Lima and not even from the capital, Ayacucho. The brothers grew or were raised in São Miguel in the village and on a farm, and they had to move from there because of terrorism, and there was an opportunity. They had to leave their lands, and they saw the opportunity of staying in Ayacucho and selling drinks. So 35 years later, one of the companies, the main multinational from Peru, and one of the top companies from Latin America, they're in more than 20 countries. And we are the main beverage companies in the world in 8 categories. But since the brothers were born in biodiversity and asking about how to contribute to the biodiversity, the companies in the Industrial Revolution, their function was to satisfy or address the needs of the consumers. So we created consumers in the Industrial Revolution, and it was 8 million consumers that were consuming all of the resources. But now in this new phase where you have the climate and the natural regulation, the companies should have a different function. And this is what we see in the group. We're contemplating the needs of Mother Earth, because the companies are co-responsible for being able to take the civilization to the next generation. And we're going through a crisis in the planet now, and the companies should have this responsibility. And if we put the services of Mother Earth so that human beings can continue to exist and for the civilization to continue to exist, what do we need from Mother Earth? In the countries here in South America, we need to stop the deforestation, and other countries in the world as well. So we're in 12 of the most biodiverse countries in the world. We should stop the deforestation, because if we talk about carbon, for example, more than 60% of carbon emissions in Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, Bolivia, this comes from deforestation and the bad use of the earth, not from the industry. That's why we have to stop the deforestation. And they don't do it because they're bad or because they're ignorant. They do it because they think they're going to have better economic resources with less of a jungle instead of having the living jungle standing. So let's make a drink that will provide value for the standing forest. And we put products in this, and the juices from the Amazon fruit bought directly from the communities who are the guardians of these forests. We buy these superfruit, and the fruit is placed in the global market through the creation of drinks, and this has been happening for 6 years because they had never put these fruit in a bottle, and we took 6 years to develop these drinks, and then we put it in the global market. So that's why what we do, we add value to these fruit and from the standing forest, and it's green gold, that's what we call it. And we want the world to know that this green gold has much more value, much more than yellow gold or black gold. And the standing forest in the Amazon is an economic resource, which is the future of the Amazon. And that's why we have the mission of giving value to the standing forest. So having value chains and bio business with adequate value. So we started in Peru. There's more than 24 communities in 4 national regions, and this grew and went on to Colombia and Ecuador, where we also created this value chain, and we are giving value to all of these superfruit, always buying directly from the local communities in the Amazon. And we work with more than 40 communities, more than 500 families in these countries, so that they can have their own business and they can protect their forest. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jorge. I think out of this first round, it becomes very clear that talking about bioeconomy doesn't mean talking only about the structuring of the market and the business. It's also understanding the different levels in all of the business. So basically, it's not only about consumption and how we can consume in a more conscious manner, but it's also our relationship with these products, our relationship with Mother Earth, and all of these products. So I think accessing these international markets, we have to understand that the products have because of all of these processes that are incorporated because of their the historic processes and the existence of the product. So before we go to the next round, I'd like to call our correspondent, Fernanda Stefani, about bioeconomy from 100% Amazonia, and she recorded something special for us. So she's speaking directly from Pará in Brazil, and she is introducing the factory in the forest. Let's listen to her message, Fernanda's message.
Oi, pessoal na rede, eu sou a Fernanda Stefani, sou cofundadora e atual diretora executiva da 100% Amazônia. 100% Amazônia é uma empresa de impacto socioambiental positivo, onde a gente tem uma fábrica, né, chamada Fábrica da Floresta, a partir da qual a gente compra a produção da sociobiodiversidade amazônica, das comunidades, das cooperativas, de agricultores familiares e também de agricultores regenerativos, e essa produção ela é transformada em bioingredientes que são utilizados para a indústria de alimentos e bebidas, também para a indústria de cosméticos, entre outras. Hoje, a 100% Amazônia já colocou, desde a sua fundação, mais de 100 milhões de reais de produtos, de ingredientes bioativos em mais de 74 países. Então, a gente já tem uma certa experiência aqui na Amazônia. A gente está disposto aí a trocar ideias com vocês e a gente está por aqui para visitas.
Ponto que eu queria ressaltar do
Well,
vídeo
something that I wanted to highlight from Fernanda, it's also an invitation for the event as a whole, but especially in this panel where we're emphasizing the importance of these interactions and sharing of experience in the Pan-Amazonic region. And we have individual experience, and we have to think about what we have to do to strengthen not only different sectors and segments that are specific, but also we have to understand what the different structures are. And we at Conexsus, after all these years of work, we have noticed some challenges in terms of the low diversity of the trading and the discontinuation of the support. So usually we have projects that are implemented and they have a term. They are not able to guarantee continuous support and then they close. So this gives me, listening to you gives me a lot of hope that this business, the regional business, local business has huge potential to gain scale and to be continued. So now going into our second round of questions, I have a question for Carolina. I would like to hear a little bit more about your experience considering the access of bioeconomy and the bioindustry, and what are the practices that make this relationship possible? Thank you, Ana. So I was also very happy about Fernanda's video. Let me just share my screen here. Because what we wanted to show you today is exactly about this deep dive into the system and also a study that we launched last year. And together with the EcoMais and BASF, and talking about this feasible practice. So there are several studies that talk about this in the Amazon, and our contribution was to look at the industry and these practical issues. So I'm just going to check the time. I just wanted to go through this briefly, but we brought several elements and we call them internal and external instances. So the other panelists also brought a few elements that are part of our study, but we have the internal instances of governance and strategy. So it's looking at bioeconomy as an open innovation project. So basically, you're forming an interdisciplinary committee or more open to risk and not putting bioeconomy as another vendor that I already have in my list of vendors, because we know that this relationship needs to be taken care of. And also starting with a pilot project, something small, a small scale. Of course, the ideal thing is for the company to look at a chain and structure and support it in the long term so that we will have a significant impact and forecastability for local business, but it has to be, a company from 0 to 100 or 0 to 200 would be even better. We have a small place and we will have mutual learning. And inside the internal instances, we also have the preparation, looking for vendors. So we have more structured chains, just as you said, just like Conexsus that work with community business, or as Fernanda said, with impact, businesses that create an impact that have a little more structure. And you also have the dimension, the offer, and looking at the local support, the intermediates or innovation centers. Here in the Brazilian Amazon, we have CDA, which is the Center of Bio Business in the Amazon. They have this relationship. They can provide support. And there's also legal risks that exist. That is important. We know about it. So we have relationships with several consulting companies and offices that work with these elements from bioeconomy. So we have to look at issues, for example, youth in the field. For example, working practices, that's also important to be ensured in this sense. And in other practices, when you talk about the external instances that goes beyond the company, there's also something that is extremely important, which is payment. So if we put the company to have a payment flow of more than 60 days or 3 to 5 months, that's not possible. So we anticipate the payment, and the company needs resources for this, or needs to use partnerships with insurance companies or philanthropic companies to have this possibility, so that the local arrangement will have this in the different levels. And there's also the issue of postponing the cost of the expenses in a way that is feasible. So I'm looking at the time. So there's also an element of pricing, which is very delicate, but we have to do this together, and having a local presence. So being there and knowing what the reality is so that we can comment on this relationship. And finally, there's the sectorial cooperation. I'm going to talk more about this in the next round. What we have done in practice after this study and what came from this study, but we have a pre-competitive environment between the companies that are buying from a certain chain in the same place for them to be able to make investments and to be able to share the risk. So there are several elements that can be collaborative, even in terms of distribution of logistics and taking advantage of the products. So basically, a cooperative table is going to produce acai, but it's also going to produce cocoa. One company is going to buy acai, the other one cocoa, and we have these arrangements. So I just wanted to conclude with this element of the environment that I also mentioned. And we are looking at how we can make this practice feasible. And over here, we have panel members that bring practical examples of this relationship. So I don't want to go over the time. That's it. Thank you very much. Great, Carol. Thank you. Thank you for this panorama and this very systematized explanation and sharing the study made by Quintessa today. So I invite everyone to visit Quintessa. This is one of the studies that they've made. There's a series, and definitely it is worth looking at for everyone to look at. Conexsus also has publications about how to make the activation of community systems, and it's for you to, you can also go into the Conexsus site. And this leads to my next question about how we can strengthen the production of the community producers when we talk about these larger purchasers, and how we can promote alliances without the bottlenecks that we have in logistics that we've been talking a lot about. So maybe our ecosystem could be more strategic. Maybe it could be a solution. How do you see this? Thank you very much for the question. In fact, I agree with the fact that the regional alliances can help to solve the symmetry that exists in the market. We all know in politics, as well as in trade and in every activity that we work on, that everything depends completely on the type of base that we have. So, for example, in nuts, this is a product that is collected in the Amazon, the Brazilian Amazon, and there are others that have, the internet connection is not very good. So many of these people who are there extracting the products from the jungle, they don't really know the points of their region where they're able to get better products. So there should be a way of grouping these people together, everybody who is working in the cooperative, so that based on all of this, all of them will have the possibility of being able to participate in business, and for them to also have access, so more direct access to the producing company. And if we also think about exporting, the same issue, because this symmetry with information about the importers and exports, there's a big gap there. And why is that? We go back to the market niche. So nuts is a small niche. There's a volume of about $300 million a year. So the main part is divided amongst very few players who are importing these products from Europe and Asia, and they try to keep a black box between what actually goes on in the market and the consumers and what happens in the international market as well. So I believe it would be an excellent solution for this whole problem, and more specifically, also thinking about nuts. Because this is such a small market, it's about 2,000 containers a year, maybe we could see the traceability using blockchain. So we have seen this, we have seen these alternatives here in Bolivia. We have worked on this, thinking about a system that can be implemented to guarantee traceability from the harvest of the nut and its trading in the final market, the end market. And about your second question regarding the bottlenecks in a country like ours, Bolivia, I don't know what happens in other countries. I don't know what the infrastructure is in Brazil. But here in Bolivia, we have a great disadvantage, which is the infrastructure of roads for trucks. It's not very good. It's precarious. So over the time between the harvesting of the nut, which is between December and April, also considering the rainy season, the roads cannot be used, and the people who make this collection, the harvesting of the nuts, they cannot have access to the markets immediately, and they cannot sell according to the right time that they have the product. So there should be, or we should think about possible investments and funding to help these producers so that they will be able to go to the market and so they don't feel obliged to sell their product based on access and when they're able to make these, to transport the products. Yes, definitely we're talking about a fair price and how we're able to strengthen the chains and community businesses so that these prices and values are part of the community. So I would like to give the floor to Jorge so that he can explain how he sees the private sector acting more strategically, strengthening these territorial ecosystems, and in the long term that we see, that we've been discussing in the panel as a whole, and how these discussions fair, things like a fair price and logistic bottlenecks in the sector. Your microphone is off. Yes. Thank you for the question. And sorry, I was muted, but more precisely, this is a very important point, the issue of a fair price and in the long term as well. So creating value chains in the long term. Of course, we have a very important point in terms of the companies, because if we create a product, so you create a product, it has to be a long-term product, of course. And this has always been a problem in the Amazon, because the Amazon was able to get funds for projects and make projects feasible. They would get to the communities with these projects. They started doing things, and then there was no more market for these things. And since there was no market, the money was over, the project was over, and it didn't really last in the long term. That's why it's important for large companies to get involved, because when a company creates a brand and this product behind it, it begins to be sold in the international markets, and this creates a value and a market in the long term. That's why it's a very important point in terms of private companies. Then we also have the competitive advantages. That's also extremely important. Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, Brazil, Bolivia, the Amazon countries, and Brazil is part of the BRICS. So maybe we could set Brazil aside because it is bigger, but the other countries don't have such a great economy. And if we actually put all of this on the table, they're not even in G7 or G20. And if they were G100, maybe Bolivia would be there, right? when we think about biodiversity, so in terms of biodiversity, we are leaders. So we are the G7 of biodiversity in the world. So the competitive advantage of our countries is exactly in the biodiversity. So if I show you a cell phone and you have the best camera, the best screen, the best memory possible, and it was made in Peru or Bolivia, you're going to laugh, right? And you're going to say, oh, I don't believe it. I'm not going to buy this device. But if it's made in the United States and in China, you're going to buy it and you're going to think it's good. Yeah, it's good, so I'm going to buy it. So if I show you juice that is 100% juice made of Amazon fruit without any conservation or artificial agents, completely natural, made in China or in the United States, and then you look at me and you say, no, that's impossible. That can't be good. So if I tell you that it was made in Ecuador and Peru or Bolivia or in Brazil, then you're saying, oh, okay, then you believe it. Yes, I believe it. It has to be good. The product has to be good. The competitive advantage of our products in this new industrial revolution. Why are we calling it a natural revolution? Because considering the crisis in the world, the climatic conditions, and because of the pandemic, the users, I hate the word consumer, I say users, the conscious users of the world, they're willing to pay a little bit more for a product that is natural and more than an artificial product. And we have several natural products in the world, our countries do. So the competitive advantage that we have to be able to offer to the world natural products that at this moment are more fashionable than the artificial ones. And that's why we have a great opportunity in our countries, and this competitive advantage is there. And from then on, from this natural revolution, we can value and give value to these products and create a market for these value chains. Doing something that the industrialized countries cannot do. Obviously, if we start thinking about computers and cell phones and telephones, we're always going to be competing with other companies that do this better than we do, and they've been doing it for much longer as well. However, with these products of biodiversity, we have this competitive advantage. And obviously, all of you have been selling nuts since the 1800s. And this is the future of our countries. And to be in biodiversity, we're already in biodiversity, always considering that a value chain be created that will maintain the standing forest. And besides that, it's the future of our community, because our Amazon communities, they are not peasants. They are people who live from the forest. They live from the forest. I'm repeating it for all of you. So if we value the products from the forest, who are the biggest experts in the collecting of these products in the Amazon? Of course, it's these communities. So we're going to be able to generate an opportunity for them to create companies and generate revenues from something that they've always done in life, which is to collect products from the Amazon forest. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jorge. And it's very inspiring what you say. I think there are several studies that have been shown, and the Amazon forest with its level of diversity, it was almost planted and composed by our traditional population, our local communities. So I think it's also very important to see that bioeconomy is something that already exists historically. And what we're trying to do is understand how to strengthen these chains so that they will be able to provide a dignified and fair life to these community dwellers that have been doing this for such a long time. And I think there are many opportunities, right? So our conversation has already shown several. And I think the first one is for us to be able to act together. I think we have a common view about the power of the forest, of the Amazon forest, and We have challenges that are very similar. We have value chains that are very similar as well. And access to the international market is still, well, not only the international market, but markets in general. This is still something very challenging. But we also have a series of maybe qualities that are different as a country that we can add up. So in Brazil, we have Colombia, the biggest country with biodiversity, and so on. So I think another great opportunity that we have to be explored is bringing together innovation. So we made some studies, and less than 5% of the community business in the Amazon has this partnership with innovation. So we still have a whole field to grow in for our products, for these insertions that are becoming bigger. Now, moving on to our third and large round, and we're going to move on to the final remarks. Carol, I'd like to hear from you a little bit about the contracts between the communities, the local communities, and the buyers, and what this challenge is like, the challenge of accessing these markets with this contract. So you know a lot about this area, so if you could share a little bit of the process, that would be interesting for all of us. Thank you. Well, I'm going to share my screen again to be able to tell you about the administration that we've been doing, which is exactly the point you're talking about contracts. And it's an initiative called Fortes, and it was done with Quintessa and Conexsus and the National Amazonic Fund. And we were looking exactly at how several actors can work together. As you said, Conexus looks at community business, and we look at this connection of the business, and we work with the community business and bringing innovation and technology. So usually we're talking about things that create an impact. And the Fundo da Amazônia, the Amazonic Fund, JBS, and we can see the need to be able to work and provoke the private sector. In Brazil, in our country, we have Natura, is a company that relates to the socio-bioeconomic chains, but Brazil as a great power and a reference. When we look at this issue, we need to mobilize more companies, and we know that the contract, we brought this whole thing. And this is something that makes the connection feasible. It honors the people and the forests. And there's also a business perspective for the large companies. So it's a program that tries to use this experience and this language with great companies, and also looking at the chains that are at the end with different partners and supporting this relationship. So over here, positioning bioeconomy as a source of strategic value. So just like the new and sustainable inputs for new products, and also operational efficiency, which is what we put in the Ambev chain, as I said before. And it brings the argument of positioning the brand as being sustainable and consistent. So basically, they're using bioeconomy, and there's a direct contribution towards restoration and conservation and local revenues. And the last argument is that considering international instability, political instability, developing local supply chains also has a positive aspect within this context. And over here, we're looking at companies that have never had a relationship with bioeconomy, so they want to explore this a little more, or they have done it before, they know where the bottlenecks are, and they want to move forward. So we say, okay, so we're stuck in this place with a contract, help us with a contract, and we do this together with one of our partner legal offices, or there's the challenge of finding vendors. So we know that this is a challenge with different partners to be able to get to the right people. And there's also an element of interlocution in the supply area and the marketing area and the legal area and the product area. We know it's nothing trivial. And also the legal aspect involved. So in this journey, we start looking at the opportunities that the company has with bioeconomy. We set a list of priorities. Okay, so I want to adjust a specific product, or I have a target to reduce the carbon emissions in this chain. So we're going to explore what is possible, either looking directly at the communities or the supply of nuts or cocoa, or also looking at things that will impact the business and they will bring some innovation or some technology. Or also, we have talked about CBA, which is the Center of Biobusiness in the Amazon, and they have bioeconomy studies that are being done. And then we have the adhesion of the companies, and we started this project in the beginning of this year. I cannot bring the names of the companies that have adhered yet, and it's going to become formal very soon, but they are starting this journey. And this is what I talked about, the mapping and the curatorship of the vendors and technical aspects in terms of quality, quantity, and price. The element that Ana was talking about of formalizing this supplier. So looking at the approval of the supplier, definition of price, definition of contracts or agreements, so that it will be fair for both sides. And then we have the first test that has been done. So over here, it's exactly over the next few months, we're going to have several practical issues showing what we have done with these companies that have adhered to the program that we can't talk about yet, but it's a point that we have looked at very carefully to try and bring this whole thing about the look at bioeconomy and complementing with what we already have in the ecosystem, and also bring the partner companies that we already have. That's it. Thank you. Thank you, Carolina. And we received a question here in the chat, and I would like to ask you this question. So it is from University of Guayaquil and Henry Mendonça, and he's asking about the social impact in the community generated by the trading of the nut and how this trade has contributed to the formation of sustainable value chains for this product. Thank you very much for the question. Well, let's see. We have observed in this question the socioeconomic context of the nuts in Bolivia, in the Amazonic region, specifically in the region of Pando, where it is possible to observe that in more than 90% of the surface, it is still a forest. And people have a high awareness of preservation of the forest because they know that they live from these products, these renewable products coming from the forest. And this awareness became anchored in the different communities over the last 40 to 50 years. And everybody was aware that their impact and their added value was exactly in the extraction of the nut, and being able to observe in the last year that if we comply with certain regulations, international regulations, to be able to allocate their product, in this specific case, we're talking about certification of the forest. So then they're going to have access to better conditions or better prices for their products. So the issue of fair commerce, fair trade is also something that has a huge impact in the Bolivian Amazon, but we haven't seen this being reflected over all the Andean territory, because for us to be able to have access to fair trade, we need to implement local governance, and this is a huge problem for these communities because the sector for the collecting of the nuts, it is basically informal. And there's also the issue that informality or semi-formality with the creation of associations or even other entities. So they are able to, they have to respect a certain governance, they have to respect the legal aspects, and they're not always, they don't really want to do it in the beginning, right? But those who have had direct benefits out of this governance, the governance that was implemented, they are observing this, and therefore they are more willing to use this and talk about international regulation being implemented. So it is possible to say that ever since the collection and having a governance for that, there can be a huge social impact in the communities of the Pandu region. And once again, these communities will have greater demands, not only in terms of the people who do the collection, but also the buyers and the exporters. Thank you very much. Thank you, Emia. So now I'm going to give the floor to Jorge for this next round. I really wanted to hear from you what is still missing for us to unlock access to the business, community business with the markets of bioeconomy in the Amazon, looking at the difference that Agi makes. Well, in fact, I would say exactly what we need. What we need is an interesting question because the countries like Peru or Ecuador or even Bolivia, we are countries from the Andean region and also the Amazonic region. So in other words, the Andean countries, they have been in touch with the market economy for 500 years. But the Amazonic ones, no, this is something new for them. It's maybe 50 years that we've been in contact with this connection with this market economy. And until now, who have they been involved with? With the local governments, the regional governments, the state governments, with NGOs, and also the international cooperation. But what is extremely important now at this point is that these communities will have this contact with large companies to be able to create value chains and create markets for their products. So this, of course, in the long term. And these companies in our countries, the large companies in our countries, will stop giving their back to the Amazon and will in fact see that there is a great opportunity, specifically in working with these Amazon population and working with their products. As I said, it's our competitive advantage. And ever since the creation of these cooperatives, this is something that is beautiful. If we're working with a company like Aachen, they have to be formal because you need to generate invoices. And, generating invoices, there's a beautiful story in our community, right? One of the communities we work with, they're not only owners of land, but they're also communities who are part of the national impact. So it's 2 million hectares in the forest. We work in primary forest to be able to give value to all of this. And one of these communities just received the first loan from a bank. So it's an Amazonic community in the middle of a primary forest, in the middle of a national park, receiving a loan from a bank. Why? Because during the last 4 years, they were working with AGE, and they were able to show all of these invoices that were issued in a sustainable manner during this whole time. So this is shown to the bank, and then the bank provides a loan. So it's from formalization of the trade that you create infrastructure where they're able to obtain loans, and they are part of this community value chain, and they were not part of this before. So I believe that we have an important issue, and this is exactly the creation of the indigenous trade markets. And we have many associations, indigenous associations, that work in the political part and etc. But there's also an indigenous chamber of commerce that is in contact with the companies. I believe that this could be a fundamental step. So once again, I'd like to repeat, it is an important issue. This natural revolution was competitive. Everybody was in the industrial revolution, everybody competed with everyone. But in this natural revolution, it's one person collaborating with another. So we have to understand the population in the Amazon, because my whole life, their whole lives, they've been working in a collaborative manner. So it's important to see that all the companies are connected, the national, state, municipal governance, the NGOs, the international cooperation, and the companies. They're all together with the communities, and they will have to create these value chains. And everybody will be able to have a sustainable future, and for the Amazon to have a sustainable future with products, with international projection, always maintaining this. Thank you, Jorge. So I'm going to break the protocol. I would really like to give you some time for your final remarks and maybe a general question, taking advantage of our context here. And this was something that came up in our panel quite a bit. What is the next step that you would like to see? So if you could maybe talk about some hope that you have, something for the Amazon, what would that be? Let me start with Carolina, and then Aimee, and then we're going to conclude with Jorge. Great, thank you. I would like to thank you for this moment and the next steps in this connection that we've been talking about. The initiatives that we have today are seen as the Brazilian market, right? So the study that we did with regard to the industry, or Fortes, which is a program to get large companies focused on bioeconomy. And this is basically focused on Brazil now. And I would like to have several companies from Latin America looking at bioeconomy as well, because there are many challenges and lessons learned. And I would love to see more programs with this sort of territorial and regional view. And there's also an exchange in terms of business. So just like an organization that looks at large companies and also looking at business, and definitely we would be able to think about programs for development and looking at the regional area. So looking at the potential business they have at the exchange, of success cases, and learning, just like I talked about at this level of the business. So it's community business that is in the territory, and also the business that causes an impact, and something more structuring that will connect our regions. That's my wish for the next steps. And thank you once again for the invitation. Aimee, over to you. Your microphone is off. Sorry about that. Thank you very much. So the first thing that I want to say is that all of the participants of bioeconomy should be aware that they are going into long-term projects. So we cannot have an exchange that is ipso facto. We have to be aware that the bioeconomy is built with patience. And how should we deal with the strategy? The strategy should be structured according to, first of all, the territory where they want to implement the bioeconomy. They should listen to the different voices of the local communities and where they are, where they extract the product, and where you want to extract the bioeconomy. Then we should have a governance established, as I said before. Governance should be one of the points that should be in the rural area in South America. And we should also encourage the local values. So it's no use wanting to implement or encourage bioeconomy if you're going to produce added value to these products in industrialized centers. That's why we should see this balance in terms of industrialization between the industrial centers and, on the other hand, providing value to these products in the local communities. And I also think that we should have funding projects or funding mechanisms that are adequate to the region where you want to implement the bioeconomy, because the socioeconomic conditions of the region, also in Bolivia. So over here, we're talking about a small region here in Pando. There are several needs, there are several conditions, and this has to be seen specifically. So we have to check how we can improve and comply with the needs of the region. So I consider that it should be a topic that should be seen, they should look at the needs in specific areas, because in the same way, biodiversity and the different ecosystems that we have in the Amazon, they're not the same. We cannot manipulate a global context of bioeconomy or apply the same formula to each of the regions. We can't do that. Thank you, everyone. And Jorge? Well, from my side, the next steps are the market. It's the market. Because, well, let me give you an example of the superfruit from the Amazon that we work with. So let me give you the classic example. What is the juice that is consumed the most in the world? Orange juice. And why do people consume orange juice? Because of vitamin C content. But of course, this is interesting. Ever since the 60s, because of the agro industry, if you take an orange in the 60s and you get another one from today, the orange has lost 80% of vitamin C because of the industry. So in the Peruvian Amazon, we have kami that grows in the flooded areas of the region, in Ucayali. And camu has between 25 times more vitamin C compared to an orange. So if people drink orange juice because of the vitamin C content, or for another reason that people talk about, they want to take vitamin C capsules, right? Synthetic vitamin C. The body does not assimilate this in the same way because it is not recognized as something natural. It's not a natural compound. So camu that has this whole vitamin C content, this is the ideal product if you want to take vitamin C. The problem is that nobody knows this fruit. Why? Because, of course, the orange is in Europe, in Asia, and for thousands of years, but this other fruit is not. So these super fruit from the Amazon that have these super properties, why do they have these super properties? Once again, because of competence, because in a European forest, why why do the trees have fruit? It's for the animals and the birds to eat, and then they're going to take the seeds and spread them out in the forest. In a European forest, there are 2 or 3 types of fruit. Of course, they eat what is there, and that's it. They have to eat that because that's what they have. But in the Amazon, with 2,500 different types of trees, you can actually have an attractive fruit for the animals to eat. So they have all of the vitamins, but they're not well known. So that's why the next step is to work together so that the consumers, such as the users, as I like to call them, the international users, so that they will know the values of these fruit. We're also talking about the nut that comes from the Amazon. So the nut has, there are several containers that go around the world, but nut has selenium, and no other dried fruit has this. That's why you have to make these fruit be known. So working together so that the international markets will know about the values of the superfruit. And not only that, but the academia as well, because there are 20,000 studies about oranges and apples and hazelnuts, and there's nothing about the fruit that comes from our countries. That's why the next step is to work to be able to place adequate value and make it a fad, to make this fruit and the products a fad. These wonderful products that are, they're super fruit and super products that come from the Amazon in the international markets. Carolina, Jorge, Aimee, thank you very much. I think we have great next steps to follow. We talked about sharing not only of experience, but also of what is learned in the territories and how we can trade more between us and how we can use this power to access new markets and how can we share so we can actually have research and regional development to be able to overcome the barriers that we talked about here. For example, logistic ones, legal ones, and how we can, above all, replace the narrative about the products of socio-bioeconomy and guarantee added value to all of these products that come from our forests. And also, when we look at the Pan-Amazonic perspective and making us connect as a network, increasingly the Pan-Amazonic Network for Socio-Bioeconomy is one of the initiatives that tries to understand our context. And Conexsus is also launching a new program, which is Amazon BioEco, that is always going to have access to the network. And the great objective of all these new initiatives in a network is for us to be able to respect individualities of each of the countries and the traditional population, and also understand what is ours as a basin, as the Amazon basin, so that we can position ourselves better and to be able to promote all of these next steps that we talked about here. So I think it's very clear from this panel that bioeconomy is much more than a concept. It is a daily practice to have the local population that resist to innovation and they have love for the territory. So I think today, accessing the markets also means accessing a network that is reliable, and this is something new for the Amazon region. So we're very sad in Conexsus to not being able to we were very happy to participate here. We're very well positioned in our narrative. So I would like to thank you all very much. Thank you, Carolina and Aimee, Jorge, and please follow the next panel. I'd like to invite you to do that. This afternoon, we're going to have access to markets and business. And tomorrow we're going to have knowledge and education. And Thursday, we're going to conclude the event with border cities. And I'm also celebrating the existence of this space. And I think it's the first one of several different ones talking about the Amazon basin. Thank you very much.